Good evening, and welcome to SlushHeap, Season 2, Episode 3. And the topic for tonight is writing children's books. And we have some fantastic guests that fit right into what we're trying to talk about tonight. So with that, let me introduce my co-host, Darcy. You want to take it away and introduce our guests?
Of course, of course. Good evening to everyone, and thanks for tuning in, as usual. We're here tonight with a couple of writers, actually two different levels of children's writing, I'd call it. We have Joe Marshall, who writes what most would consider children's books, more for the grade school, early grade school, and then we have L.M. Preston beside her, and she writes middle grade or youth, right? Young adults, so sort of a wide-ish range for you, and you know, hits more on the older kids, the high schoolers, teenagers, that sort of thing. So we have a good coverage tonight, and we look forward to speaking to both of them. And I am going to hand it back over to Rudy to get started with the questions tonight, but I look forward to speaking with both of you.
Thank you.
Wonderful point. Now, LM, were you kind of in the same boat? How did you start writing?
Well, actually, I wrote a lot when I was younger, really as a way of expression. And then when real life happened, school, college, kids, work, I put that aside. And I think when my son was about 12 years old, I took him to the bookstore and I asked him to go find something to read. I have 4 kids. And my daughter always could find, you know, my younger daughter could always find something. But my oldest son would come back and he says, I don't see anything I like. There's no books with boys on them. And so I kind of was talking to my husband. I was like, oh, it's so frustrating that Frank doesn't have any, you know, anything that he can read when we go to the bookstore. And my husband always knew I liked to write. But my day gig, I'm an engineer, and I used to teach a little bit on the side at the college level, and I used to love to create these wild things for my students. And so my husband said, well, why don't you write a book that our son can read? And so that's really what kind of sparked my passion for writing. And it's funny because most of the books that I do write, I tend to kind of fit really good into a male point of view. And I think it's really because, you know, I'm motivated by knowing that there's not very many male point of view books in young adult or middle grade fiction that appeal to both girls and boys.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I find the same issue, even younger still, and I've had several people from local school districts mentioning that even to find, for instance, easy readers, to find them for girls, stories that appeal to girls, it's easy, but to get those boys motivated is very difficult. So I think it's wonderful that you're aiming at them. And I also think it's ironic that both of you decided to write because of your kids. And that's great. Do you know, I wonder, do you think that it's possible for someone who doesn't have young children to be able to write to that audience?
I do, but it's much easier when you have younger kids because it's easy for me to get into the teen voice because I'm around them all the time. I'm either picking them up, taking them somewhere, and it's really easy for me to listen to snippets of conversation or to just really, you know, get into their heads about a lot of things and even get feedback. So that makes it a little easy. But if I have some writer friends that are really they have a young at heart spirit and they do amazing jobs at writing really interesting characters. So I don't think you need to have kids in order to be able to really express yourself as a young character in your books.
That's wonderful. It makes me wonder, do you find that it's more difficult to write a children's voice than it is to write an adult voice? I'll aim it at Joe first.
I don't think I have the vocabulary, Darcy.
I I think it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I said to Rudy is I haven't been able to read the full books, but I've read at least snippets of both of yours. And I think that it's wonderful that you both don't shy away from big vocabulary for kids. I think so often authors try to sort of dumb it down, and neither one of you do that. Was that a conscious decision, or was that just something that naturally happened?
Well, it was, I'd say, somewhat conscious. My daughter beta reads a lot of my stuff, and so does my son. So they kind of gauged to me which words were like over the top and which words were just too baby. And what I find with asking young readers directly is they like a mixture. They don't want it to be school reading, but they do want to be a little challenged in their reading a bit. They want to be treated intelligently. So finding that mix was a little bit of learning from them. What they wanted at certain ages. And for middle school, dialect, you kind of run into some kids are going to think it's too mature talk, and some kids are not. But you also have different groups of kids, like certain gifted and talented kids are very intellectual kids. They want big words. And
right.
How the regular kid, not so much. So you have so many dynamics to play with when you're dealing with young people, and they're really forgiving, believe it or not.
No, I know, and it's interesting. I actually found that very interesting because I'm not sure if you're both aware, but they just came out with like a core curriculum across the country now that kids in schools have to follow, and it really has impacted the books that teachers can choose from. And one of the biggest things is like how many syllables you have in each sentence determines what grade level it's considered. Oh, and it's crazy. I can't imagine sitting there and counting out the syllables or the whatever it is. And please don't take me verbatim. I don't know all the the rules and regulations, but I've overheard little bits and pieces about it, and to me that's insane. So I was just wondering, what advice you'd give to a new author who's trying to get into that. But obviously, in your case, just write it naturally and let it flow.
People are thinking too much if they're doing that.
Yeah.
And then a new author just needs to get the story out. The hardest part is the first draft. Anything after the first draft, you can fix.
No, I think that's wonderful. LM, what about you? How do you choose your audience to read?
I still have a pretty good group to choose from because my kids range from ages of 18 to 9. So usually my kids are probably the most brutally honest of any other reader that I've given my books to. And then they also pass them to their friends. But when I do library visits, and I also volunteer and do teen writing groups, I give them samplings of my work to kind of beat up. So they're very helpful there too.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Now, Rudy, was there anything that you wanted to add? I don't want to leave you out of the conversation.
No, that's fine. I'm sitting here taking this all in. I had a question for LM. When I did my research on you, I was really amazed by the number of books that showed up on your webpage. How many books have you penned?
Wow. Gosh, I even have to count them myself. I'm thinking I have the two middle grade books, Explore X series. Okay. I have my YA. I have 3 young adult series out. So that's another, maybe 3-4 books there. And then I have a young adult contemporary romance short story series that I release a short story YA romance every summer, kind of as, kind of something to keep my readers engaged. So probably I'd say now about 7 or 8, and I'm working on 3 releases for next year.
Wow.
You're a busy woman. Along with my last one.
Well, I only chose one to actually get familiar with. I chose Purgatory Rain.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? I wasn't ready for it. I really wasn't ready for it. You know, the fact that, and I think I read someplace a review of it, which makes up these words that I'm going to use. The fact that it's a fantasy, but it goes into the paranormal, horror, mystery, and yet you keep it for the young. You know, I don't know if you know how you'd manage that.
Well, I guess it's in the tone and just kind of the tension building, and I do love kind of mixing genres.
Okay.
So adding the era mystery, but it's most of my books have one singular theme, and it's always the underdog turns hero kind of theme, because I do believe that kids are infinitely powerful. They just haven't realized it yet to make something change, you know.
Right.
So it's fun to write.
I think that's a great message right there.
That's an understatement. With as many as you've written, it's got to be fun. You know, seriously. But you know, the fact you still, like I said, you have to be careful because you're going after the younger audience, that you don't overstep certain bounds, and you seem to have that in check. You know,
yeah, well, I think for me too, I'm more conservative compared to a lot of other authors and what they expose their young readers to. I don't think that you need to have sex in order to build, you know, anticipation and the angst of falling in love. You don't need to have brutal horror in order to build the intensity or the tension in having a foe that you know is out to get you. So it's really kind of using some of the things that I've read other authors do that I really, really enjoy. But they still kept a lot of the brutality out of the writing and a lot of the sexuality out of writing for young people. And I have a problem dropping the F-bombs in my upper YA books. So you don't see my characters ever say an F word because I just can't bring myself to write it. Now I can write other ones, and my kids get me all the time and say, "Mom, just commit to it," you know. But I just can't do it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Children do push you in a direction sometimes you don't want to go. My little girl Allie is always saying, "Mom, you have to kill off one of your twigs. You know, you've got to make a little drama there." You know, I'm like, "But I love my twigs. I don't want to kill them."
I think that you guys are making saying something valid, though. If you're not being honest to who you are, then your book's not going to come across the way that you want it to. So I think I commend you for standing up for yourself and making your own choices. And I also, you know, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, you know, not using certain words or not using certain topics, because that's actually a really big point of debate recently with especially the YA genre, age group, I should say. But because people are really sure how far they should push it, there's this whole thing about pushing YA a little further so that it almost becomes an adult book, and at what point is it no longer YA? Do you think that because you've made those decisions, that's what makes it YA, or is it just the storyline in general?
I believe that it's because I don't push certain lines that it's YA. I can still tell the same story. I just don't have to get as graphic or as, you know, I guess, sensual with it. I can limit the story, but it's still there. The core of the story is still there. There's still a lot at stake. Characters still get killed that are young. You just don't see it. One character you kind of see it, but that's not what the focus is. The focus is on what she has to say. And I think when you treat young people as though they're intelligent, so you make your characters, whenever they say something, it should mean something. And whenever you build a relationship, it should be based on things like that without putting in the extra words or showing the, you know, I guess the bad side of that. Because I have in Purgatory Rain, which is upper YA, I'm thinking more for 14, 15 years up, there is a character that at one time used drugs and drank. But then there's another character that you would probably think would do those things, but he has a real issue with it because he already has so much he's dealing with fighting demons and trying to keep his head straight that's the last thing he wants to touch. So we give a lot of underlayers to a message with trying to make it realistic and trying to make it, kids do deal with this, but why wouldn't I deal with it? The main character is like, hey, I'm having nightmares, I'm having bad trips already, a drug can't do anything for me.
Right.
So, and you touch on those issues in young adult community without letting the character get sucked up by that one failing, because you don't want to influence young people or romanticize something that is a negative for a young person. At least I don't want to as an author.
No, I think that's a great stance to take. I wonder, do you think because you have that underlying theme, do you think it's made it easier for you to market the books? Do you follow that same strategy? How do you market your books?
Well, I started this business probably the hard way up because my husband and I started our own publishing company back in 2008 when it wasn't popular to have a small press or to self-pub. And the funny thing was he's always been into marketing, and so he really had the standpoint of we're going to talk to schools, we're going to talk to bookstores, and he made it personal. He would go out there and talk to them himself, provide them a copy of the book to read, to make a decision on their own, and it was very well received, probably more so than I ever would have thought possible. But marketing my middle grade books and marketing my young adult books, they're two totally different markets. For children's books and middle grade books, those kids still read paperback a lot, and they really like seeing you. They want to be able to touch the author, touch the book, and so I do, for my middle grade series, I do a lot of library visits, school visits, young adult book club visits. And it's because those young people are the ones that sell my book. I mean, even now after that book's cold, I'm shocked that I get emails from or letters from young middle schoolers saying, when is the third book coming out? And that market, you really have to put forth a face. You have to be present. You can't just expect to do a couple of online promotions and be able to sell to them. Doing signings in person really pushes the children's and middle grade market, but it's a forever market. Like, I mean, those kids grow up and then you could keep a book going for years and years to the children's and middle grade market, because that market will probably always want to hold a book for a while.
I think that's a good point. Actually, it brings up something else I wanted to ask tonight. It's something I've asked of children's authors in the past. How do you approach the situation with the e-readers? Do you try to format your book so that it looks good on that, or do you just kind of go for it and let happen whatever happens?
Yeah.
So, LM, how about you? I want to get over to you. How do you market your books, specifically to e-readers, since that's kind of the topic we're on right now?
Well, I market both e-readers and the paperback for my middle grade novels. The e-readers, probably, I do a lot. Whenever I do events, I give out cards with e-book downloads of some of the books. I also do Facebook parties. I do blog tours, because that's word of mouth. I also have started kind of a mini street team, but that was totally by accident. My daughter and some of her friends that had a book club, they started to spread the word about my books. So they kind of worked that out themselves. Also, you can also kind of do a street team, so to speak, online by having all your fans and just say, hey, I'll give you a prize or a bookmark if you spread the word, a tweet for me, or a Facebook blast for me, or a blog post for me, or tell a friend about my book, or go to the library and order my book or request my book. Those type of things. So I did probably a little guerrilla kind of marketing. In addition, one thing that's helped me this year, because sales are really kind of erratic in this new market, is collaborating with other middle grade writers, authors. So a new group that I started with, well, I didn't start it, but I was invited to it, called Emblazon, and it's about 20 other middle grade authors, and we just did a big giveaway for librarians with a big basket of goodies, representing all of our books. So just continuing to be creative and to spread the word of mouth, which I think really works for the middle grade market.
That's wonderful. For new authors that are breaking into children's, how do you get a blog tour, and what sort of blogs do you go after?
Well, to be honest, the best way to get one is to just find an author that you admire and see who did their blog tour and hire that person.
That's wonderful.
I did it the hard way originally and sent out over 150 emails with my media kit and the rejections and trying to filter all that, and it was a complete nightmare of work. So now it's just easy to find somebody that's willing, a blog tour coordinator, a company that's willing to take on a new author and let them do the work. And usually when you think about it, they're a lot cheaper than it would cost you to pay a publicist or to even pay an assistant to do your blog tour for you. And I don't just do a simple blog tour. I kind of build the momentum. So start off first with a cover reveal blog tour, just revealing the cover, maybe 6 months before the book comes out, and then another blog tour to reveal the book trailer, and then finally another one to reveal the ebook release, because now we release the ebook first, and then a fourth one to release the new paperback books. So it gives us 4 chances to put our 4 chances in a 6 to 8 month period to expose readers to our upcoming book.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful idea. Rudy, did you want to ask anything?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here, yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of leaving you out over there.
No, I understand. I have one question. I don't know if either one of you saw last week's show, and that was about how to write a character of the opposite sex. And one of the things that came up was how you name characters. And, I'm looking at both of your books, and LM, I noticed that your main character in the Purgatory Reign is Peter, right?
Peter Saints.
Okay.
Go figure.
We're on our first names. We're on a first name basis, right? The argument that came up last week is that you never ever use Bob, for instance, and in a novel or anything like that. And I think that actually that is the best name, because Bob the Builder would differ with them, that his books are one of the most widely read books there are, right? So
right.
How did you come up with, I realized after Peter, you named the girl Angel, was it? And
Yes.
the other character, Kyle.
Yes.
They're a little bit out there. How did you choose your names?
Well, names are a big deal. And the funny thing is, they really just come to me. I kind of think of the character and the name just pops up. So, but I will admit that in my original middle grade series, Explorer X, I actually changed the name of one of the support characters because the main character's name was ID, which starts with an A, and the support character's name was Alex, which started with an A. So I knew I couldn't have two strong characters with a name that started with A. It would confuse people. But the name really has to stick out to me as the writer. And you're right, I would never choose Bob.
Poor Rudy, man. He is just not winning any battles.
Or even Tom. Yeah, they had a point. The name makes a difference. I mean, and if you read some of the books, some of the names are really kind of like romanticized. You always see Chance. You've had to see the name Chance in a book. I stayed away from that one. I was tempted, but I didn't use Chance.
But did I hear you right that you actually create the character first and then name him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you've got to have a good image of who that person is before you can put a name to it. To him or her. I agree.
See, that's not necessarily something I heard last week, but it was probably because we didn't ask that question. But I kind of agree that because I said last week the fact that to me, if I hear a name, I can almost visualize the character already. And if you're doing that, you're playing right into my hands that way. So yes, I would agree with that. So Ellen, listening to that, I know it makes me kind of jealous because the book that I wrote with Darcy's help is somewhat like yours, except it goes through the whole age from the time I was born till I'm sitting here now, just about. And, to come up with names for those characters because we had to make them fictitious, even though it's historical fiction. We couldn't use the real names. I'm listening to Jo and what she did. That would be a lot easier to me. I mean, what do you think? I guess you don't mind coming up with names because you seem to think a lot about what you want to do there. Ellen, it's like you were saying. You had two characters that the main character's name started with an A, and the backup character, and it's something I never thought about, but you gave it some thought. Hey, wait a minute, that is confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's something I didn't figure out until after I finished writing the first draft.
That's what it's all about, exactly.
Yeah.
After the first draft, you find out where you made all your mistakes.
Exactly.
Not just, even in names. As I said last week to the audience, the book that we wrote, I allowed Darcy to name my characters because I didn't want to, by chance, make them sound like the real people. And she gave my wife a name, and I can't even remember it. And when I wrote down when I copied the first draft and handed it to her, she said, no, this isn't going to do. I said, what do you mean? I can't put your real name in here. No, I want to be called Kate. So we had to go back and change her name and every page she was in because she didn't like that name. Again, she looked at that name and that wasn't her, the way she saw it.
Yeah.
So someplace along the line she ran across somebody that she didn't like, I guess that's what it was all about. So Darcy.
Well, you guys, I was going to say, you guys have really been wonderful tonight, and we are actually at the end of our hour, but